welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered discussion related to nursing and healthcare. My name is Amie,
And my name is Sara.
and we are your podcast hosts. Today, we'll be talking about what happens on nights, stays on nights. So, really, we're going to kind of be talking about funny stories that we've either encountered, seen ourselves, witnessed, or ourselves have actually experienced. So, I think it'll be much more lighthearted than our previous episodes, but I think we need to have that delicate balance.
Yeah, and I would just like to start by saying that I was never someone that looked forward to working on nights. I did it because I had to. I don't know, Amie, what your sort of preference was when you were a nurse, like at the bedside.
So if you want me to be honest, I actually did prefer working on nights, and it's not that and it's not that I didn't like working on days. I just found my night shift was a little bit more chill. And I just found that I liked some of the nurses that kind of stayed on nights. They had very interesting personalities that were probably very similar to mine. We were pretty much a pretty goofy crew. So I really enjoyed actually working my night shifts. And yes, I'm going to say it, I enjoyed my 3 hour naps. Not that they happened all the time, but it was nice to wake up at like quarter to seven and be like, oh, where am I going? Oh, it's home time, and get ready to go home. So
Yeah, and
I
I
enjoyed
think
that.
that I think you had the luxury of having 3 hours because the whole notion of sleep break. Let's just put it out there right now because we know that everybody on every unit goes on sleep break. So let's not pretend it doesn't happen. I think it's just
Yep.
a matter of the unit culture as to where you sleep, when you sleep, and how you arrange sleep breaks with the team. So I
Right.
know that when I worked on postpartum, it was really well organized. So for example, first break would be 12:30-ish to about 3, and then second break would be 3:30 to 6. And
Were you a first break girl or a second break girl?
well, because I never really liked working nights, I couldn't really decide what I preferred. So
Uh,
I just went with whoever, like whatever my buddy wanted. I just said I would take the other. Um,
okay. Like I hated first break. I remember being like, oh, all right, we've already assigned breaks, and Amie, you're gonna go off at 12. And I was like, oh man, because waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning is the worst. It's like, all right, you hear the loud banging, it's like, oh no, like you look at the time and it's like 3 o'clock, and it's like, oh, you have a patient, and she's like fully, and you're like, oh man, like I am not ready. And you gotta like get up and like re-wake yourself up. So like I normally would bring like a washcloth in with me, and I'd like wash my face with cold water to kind of like freshen myself up, brush my teeth. And I know I was still like, I didn't fully have my skin in the game. I was still like super tired. But then, like as a labor and delivery nurse, you just kind of you go in and you're like, yeah, let's get this baby out.
well,
But
see,
you're
I
like,
kind of
but I
feel
mean,
the
you just make it
opposite.
work.
Now that you've talked about it, I kind of feel the opposite because in postpartum and also for NICU, there's often a lot of stuff that has to be done right at 6 o'clock. So, for example, weighing the baby or doing blood work or making sure that you have everything ready for when the day shift physician comes on. So I remember I was working on um, antepartum, just covering, and they were really, really
Right.
strict on breaks. So it was either 12 to 3 or 3 to 6. And I was told, I was actually forced to go on a 3 hour break, even though it wasn't my normal unit. They're like, no, you are going to go, you're going to have your 3 hour break. We do not want to see you until 6. And then I come back at 6 and I'm all disoriented, running around because I can't find equipment. And I'm like doing like the newborn screening and the weights and the jaundice test. And I felt so out of sorts, but it was part of the culture that you just had to go away for that length of time. So I really think it
Yeah.
just depends. And also, what I liked about certain units is that the team leader would pre-assign you where you were going to sleep. So,
Yeah.
but when
Here's the
I
room that you need to go into.
but when I worked in NICU, it was a free for all. So you would take a piece of paper like a gauze, right? And you would write your name on it and you would stick it on whatever couch you could. And you just had to find your space because there weren't that many spaces and there were a lot of nurses. So there were over 20 nurses per shift. So you can imagine
Right.
that space gets a little bit tight.
Well, it's funny that you said like you write your rooms down on a gauze. Like we had the same kind of like methodology where, we had certain rooms, and certain rooms were colder, some were too hot. So you knew the room that you really wanted to get. but we'd covertly write our room, like where we were, on like a certain sheet of paper, and we hid it, and then well before like at 6 o'clock, we would like put it into the like patient confidentiality shredder, so there was like no evidence of us sleeping at. But it's crazy that we were trying to hide the fact that that happened, and everybody knew that like nurses sleep on nights. It's just this thing that happens, but we were very operative and covert about it.
Well, I think in some ways it's the only way that you can really survive working on nights. If you can't
Yeah.
get your break, then most of us are going to be zombies. And I don't think, as long as it's not affecting patient care and you're not missing something for it, I don't see there being a problem.
No, I agree with you. And I mean there have been night shifts that I had worked where I didn't have my break, and those ones were the ones that it was quite dangerous because like you finish your full 12-hour shift at night. Like I know for the most part I would what I would try to do is I would try to sleep obviously during the days, but then I would probably wake up at like 3, and then because I had kids, sometimes you're up longer, right?
Oh, yeah,
And then
yeah.
you still have to go in for your like 7:30, so like you're there at 7 getting report. And those nights where like I worked the full like 11.25 with no breaks, those were like the most dangerous times for me cuz driving home, like like there was times where in the winter I would drive with my window open cuz I was just that exhausted. And I mean, it's just yeah,
Well,
nurses have to sleep on nights.
I know a nurse that actually did fall asleep at the wheel and got into an accident.
Oh
Thankfully,
no.
she just drove off of the road and didn't hit anyone. But that is super scary. And it was the same sort of thing. She was driving home from nights, she was trying to stay awake, and she just nodded off. And she
Oh
crashed her
no.
car into a ditch. So it could have been way worse, but it's still really unsafe.
Yikes. Yeah, that's definitely like worst case scenario. But anyways, let's get into some of the crazy stuff that happens on night shift. So, of course, all of our stories are our own. They're experiences that we've seen or we might have heard. I mean, there might be some truth to it, might not be some truth. I don't know. I can only speak from my own experiences, and I think one of the first things I was going to talk about was actually a patient story. And I know people might be like, oh no, she's going to be slamming a patient. No, I was the patient. So I was that crazy patient on nights that my poor nursing colleagues had to deal with. And it's kind of funny. So when I had my twins, I delivered them really early, so 31 weeks and 2 days. My twins, Logan and Tristan, so they were 4 pounds. One was 4 pounds, 1 ounce, and the other one was 2 pounds, 9 ounces. Anyhow, I was actually I actually had to be rehospitalized, and so my twins ended up staying in the NICU for 6 weeks, and then I got home about a week postpartum, and I was having really bad difficulty breathing. Like I would walk from like I'd walk like 2 feet, and I was out of breath. And it was kind of funny. Like I actually was really good friends with my OB at the time, and I had her personal cell phone number, and I messaged her and I'm like, something is going wrong with me. Like I need, like I can't breathe. And she's like, get to the ED right now. And I was like, oh man. So like I rushed down to, my husband got me in the car and rushed us down to the ED. And it's kind of funny. Like I've never seen my husband get really mad because he's kind of this really quiet, somber type
He
of guy.
is. He is very chill.
And he flipped his lid at this ED nurse. So I'm not even like a week postpartum, and I'm having shortness of breath, tachycardia, like the whole 9 yards. And she's just like, okay, go back in the waiting room and sit down. And my husband's like, what? He's like, my wife can't breathe. She needs to be seen by someone now. And just then the OB came down to the ED, and I was like thankful that, like it didn't turn into this crazy scene. But kind of like the long and short of it, I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure and pulmonary edema. And then I was actually admitted to a medicine unit. Well, so this is where the crazy nurse story kind of starts. So I had a lot of pain post C-section, and I don't know, I guess like they started giving me like Percocets and morphine and all this kind of stuff. And those meds, I know for some people they're like, yeah, give me my perks, give me my no, not me. Like I took these Percocets and it made me feel like I was walking around in circles. Like I felt so nauseated, so sick, I couldn't deal with them. but it was like turning me into like a crazy person. So like my nurse would come in and I'd be all shifty and she's like, oh, what's wrong with this girl? And I'm just like, she's like, oh, here's your meds. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll take my meds. And then I started hiding my Percocets under my pillow. And my husband's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. I can't keep taking these meds. And he's like, why don't you just tell the nurse you're a nurse? And I'm like, I know, but I don't want to hurt her feelings, so I'll just keep hiding these Percocets. And he's just like, oh my God, you are nuts. And I was just like really shifty and I was really weird. And I'm pretty sure those nurses thought I was like off my rocker. But of course, all the craziness happened on nights. I guess I had some form of like sundowning where I just was like this bizarre, like demented 28 year old, really crazy from being on these narcotics. So the nurses, I have to say, were exceptional with me. And I'm so sorry to this day that I was probably the craziest patient they had seen in that like 24 to 36 hour period where I was hocked up on oxycodone, Percocets, and morphine. But I mean,
I
they
think
they
you're
took it in
being really hard on
stride.
yourself. I think you're being really hard on yourself, and the fact that they didn't call any sort of code on you is probably a sign that you were not the worst patient that day. And
Well, like it was just crazy because I was like, I was getting paranoid, and I was like, I guess it was also from lack of sleep. So I was like hiding my meds, and they'd come in and I'd be acting all weird. It was bizarre.
I
Like
can
they probably
totally
thought
picture
that
you
I
right
should have been
now.
on the mental health unit.
I can totally picture you being all shifty eyed, like looking back and forth, like you're just like, oh, I'm gonna get in trouble. What do I do? What do I do with my meds? Did your pain get better though? That's my other question.
You know what? I actually don't think so. To be because like I was just too scared to take them after it made me like it put me into like some form of psychosis. I just started hiding them and my husband was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I can't keep these. I can't take them. I can't throw them away. So I'm like shoving them into like my pillow sheets and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know.
Did
And then the
you
nurse
feel
would
like
come
you
in and
were
I'm like,
were you being sort of paranoid maybe from
yeah, I think so. Like, and I was worried that they might find out that I was hiding my perks, and it was super crazy. Like, I'm sure those nurses were like, "What is wrong with her? We need to send her to like mental health. Like, she's losing it." But I mean, I'm sure they probably they took it in stride, and I'm sure they were great with me. So I'm glad that they dealt with my psychosis, my like 24 to 36 hour psychosis. But I mean, it's all good.
Well, I can't imagine Jordan raising his voice like he did, so he must have been really, really worried about you.
Yeah, I think like I mean, I think for us we had gone through quite a bit like with having like I was hospitalized when I was around 28 weeks. So cuz I started to go into labor quite early. I had preeclampsia, I had like the whole 9 yards. I started becoming eclamptic. I needed mag sulf. It was a nightmare, really. So
Yeah.
after the delivery of the twins. And I know the NICU is kind of a traumatic experience too, seeing two of your like kids there and being super worried, and then me getting sick kind of afterwards. It was just kind of like a perfect storm. And I think people just have to understand that, when they maybe that night shift that they have that crazy patient, it's maybe because they're going through so much other different things, like whether it's social, whether it's psychological, whether it's physical. It's just sometimes just for example with me, just they were just kind,
Yeah.
even though I was shifty and acting all crazy and hiding my meds. They were just like, hey man, she's probably gone through a lot of shit. Let's just give her the benefit of the doubt tonight and just let her act shifty eyed. And they were really kind and sweet. But I'm sure I probably wasn't the only crazy patient they've ever had.
Yeah, totally.
So that's my patient story of about me being crazy on nights. But I have lots of other stuff. But I'd love to hear something from you, Sarah.
Yeah, so my story is actually about me being the nurse, and not a crazy patient, but just a crazy sort of situation, I guess. And of course, it happened on nights, and I'm pretty sure it was around 2 or 3 a.m. So I was on postpartum at the time, and I remember walking down the hall, and the ward room at the time was on my left. And I remember hearing this really, really loud banging sound, like
Oh no.
really loud, like something or someone had crashed into the bed sort of sound. So, and I remember walking into the room and seeing the curtain just from the outside kind of moving back and forth, and it was my patient's bed. So I whipped the curtain back, and
What?
she's having a grand mal seizure, like full
Oh
on
no.
seizure, like her eyes, like in the movies, right? Her eyes are rolled into the back of her head.
Holy crap.
Her legs were kicking the bed rail. So basically, she was sitting in one of those recliner chairs, and her legs were like spasming and kicking the bed. That was what the sound was,
That's
and
what the sound was. Holy crap.
her arms also were jerking forward, like bending and flexing. And the scariest part was she had the baby in her lap because she had been
Oh my
breastfeeding.
god.
But she had a history of seizure, and I know I had given her scheduled meds around 12 o'clock because she had her own meds, and at the time, as long as we knew what they were, we would just mark it down as she had taken them. And I remember watching her take them at around 12. So anyway, my first instinct was to grab the baby, and I put the baby on the bed just to get her away from the baby. And then
Right.
I ended up pushing the code blue button because I didn't know what else to do at the time. Like I knew
Right.
she had a pulse obviously, but I didn't know what else to do because postpartum we don't really have other codes that we call besides a code pink. Um,
Right.
so anyway, I push the code button. Everybody comes running. Of course, like half the nurses are sleeping, and they all leap out of wherever they're coming from, and they rush over.
Yeah.
Um, and like she was a bigger lady, and I'm not a very big person, so it took two of us to get her into the bed. So we basically like
Right.
heaved her into the bed, and she had this crazy kind of animal look in her eyes. Like her eyes were just like frantic, and she was spitting at us. Like she had lost all control. She
Oh
was spitting at
no.
us. She was fighting. Um, so basically, the team, like all we had time to do really was put an oxygen mask on her and just try to hold her down until the team arrived. And
Oh my
then
gosh.
they came, but I think by the time they came, she had stopped seizing. So they said pretty much like, okay, we're gonna put an IV back into her, but really you just need to watch her because she's fine now, and really she doesn't qualify to be in ICU or anything like that.
Oh
Um,
my god.
so then they kind of came and left really quickly. I don't even remember exactly who was there, but throughout this thing, she had also lost bowel and bladder control, so she had wet
Oh
herself.
dear.
And when she
Yeah.
sort of came around, she was really embarrassed, and I remember cleaning her
Yeah.
up. But I should actually probably back up. So at one point, when the team was here, somebody said, "Where's the baby?" And I thought,
Oh my
oh,
god.
I actually don't know where the baby is because all I remember was putting the baby onto the bed right before all madness ensued. And then someone behind us piped up and said, "I have the baby," and it was a man, like a dad holding the baby, but it wasn't his baby because he just happened to be in the room because it was a ward room. So there were four
Oh
other.
my god. He just came randomly and picked the baby up.
So I
Oh
think
my
someone
god.
must have taken the baby off the bed at some point and handed him the baby because he was a body, and we just
Oh
needed
my
to put
god.
the baby somewhere. And I don't even know why we didn't have a cot or why we didn't think to put the baby in the cot. But this poor husband of someone else was just like had been standing there this whole time holding the
Oh
baby.
my god.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
oh, that is crazy.
and then
And
so
and quite unfortunate too.
and that's not my only code blue, but I'm not going to get into the others because they didn't happen on nights. But basically, it took me a while to sort of chart everything and like look after my other patients. And what happened to that patient on days was she ended up having another seizure, but she was in the bathroom. So she had a seizure while in the bathroom, fell down, and the door to the bathroom only opens inward. So basically,
Uh-oh.
I think she was against the door and they had trouble opening it.
Oh no.
Anyway, it was just not a good situation through no fault really of anyone, but it was just really unfortunate and stressful for us. And I think that all of us talked about it for several days afterwards because it was so unusual. It wasn't like
Yeah.
one of those seizures where you just go catatonic and you're not responsive. It was like the
Like a
violent
real,
seizures.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my god.
yeah.
It's kind of funny. Your story actually reminds me of another kind of patient story that I kind of can think of. And one of the things that we on nights we kind of always talk about, especially when you come into labor and delivery and you see the board is clear, you never mention the Q word.
No, never.
Everybody knows what the Q word is. I'm not going to say it even on here because I'm afraid that I might ruin someone's day, but you never mention the Q word.
And if you do, you
So
have to
our
knock on wood.
Yes. So um we were kind of like we're looking up at the board, no patience. We're like, oh my goodness, we are gonna shop tonight. We're gonna shop online. We're gonna have wheelchair races. Like, it's like we're gonna order food in and just eat a whole bunch of crap. It is going to be the best night ever. So it's like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, the first shift is just rotating back off, and then we hear like something coming down the hall, like something really quickly. And I was like, oh, what's that? And we see like this person clearly in labor coming down, barreling down. The husband's like wheeling the chair as fast as they can, like L&D is always like a locked unit. So they're like banging on the door. And we're like, pick up the phone. And eventually we let them in. And this lady is in rip roaring labor. And we're all like, oh, let's get her to the closest room. So we get her into the room and she is screaming. And we're all like, oh my God. Like, she's like losing it. And we're like, and of course, the senior nurses are like, get your stuff together. You gotta push this baby out. You gotta like get your stuff together. And she went berserk. When I mean berserk, I've never seen this type of behavior in my life. This lady was like pulling her hair out. She was scratching at her husband. I remember she was like reaching out, trying to like grab the nurses. She grabbed a couple of them, were like scratching them. We're all like freaking out because we were all like, nobody wanted to hold her. And she was just like losing her shit. And she was screaming and cussing and pulling her hair, like tufts of her hair, Sarah. I was like, holy shit, this lady is like totally losing it. And like now she's crowning, and there's like 6 nurses in the room. The doctor like finally like comes from whatever stupor they were in, like getting up like, oh my God. And they come into the room, and she's just like climbing up the bed. Everyone's trying to pull her back down. She's like screaming and throwing the cords and all the stuff. And we're like, okay, we're not even gonna monitor her. And then she pushes this baby out. Does she look at us all after that and says, whew, that was easy? I
What?
wanted to bitch slap her. I'm telling you, I was just like, what? What just happened? She's like, oh, that was easy. Like, all of us looked at each other like, that woman is possessed. She was like acting like she was possessed by something. And then all of a sudden, oh, that was easy. It was the
Wow.
craziest thing we had ever seen. Like, this woman, I couldn't believe it. I remember coming home and saying to my husband, I'm like, she was pulling out tufts of her hair. Like, I remember going back into the room and like cleaning up, and just like pieces of her like hair, just like putting pieces of her hair in the garbage. I'm like, oh my God. Like, she doesn't even realize that she like was pulling out her hair, scratching us. Like, some nurses had some huge like scratches on their arms and stuff. It was insane.
I don't
And I was,
even know what to say about that. Like, you think that she would be in so much pain that she wouldn't have the energy to like exert on scratching and throwing and, climbing the bed. But
she was crazy. That's all I could boil. And then just calmly, just like, whew, that was easy. I'm like, what?
was
Oh
she a
my
malted?
God. No, I think she was a primip, but she was just like nuts. She was just like
Oh,
crazy. And then just, oh, that was easy. Like, are you kidding me, lady? Like, you almost killed everybody in here. And just, oh, it was, I've probably seen thousands of births. I have never, to this day, has seen anything as crazy as that was. And of course, it had to be on a night where like nothing was happening.
yeah. Well, you had something happen. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think I was traumatized by that. After seeing that, I was just like, oh my God, I don't think I want to have kids if that's how bad it's going to be.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple other stories, like just talking about other things that happen on nights. So I used to work at a hospital downtown, which was quite close to the entertainment district, and there was a nurse that only worked nights, and she liked to go out, and she actually used to go out on her sleep break instead of sleeping. She would actually go to the bathroom, get all dressed up, walk out in her heels. I don't know what she did for her 2 hours, but it was enough time to get to a club and God knows what she was doing and come back and
Oh my
get changed
God.
again. Um, no, I never did anything like that, but I used to also live really close to the hospital. So I actually like I could see the hospital from where I lived because I lived in a condo close
Okay.
by. I actually went home a couple times and slept on my break, and
Oh my god.
once I even brought like another nurse back with me. Um, and the thing is, like, we used to carry these brick phones, so it was before iPhones and all those smartphones existed. So my phone could even pick up reception. So if a patient called, like on their call bell, I could actually
That's
pick that up.
hilarious. Do you mean like a Cisco phone? Or even
Um,
before the
no, it
Ciscos?
was before Cisco. It was like literally the size and shape of a brick. And I
It was like a
remember,
walkie-talkie.
yeah, and I remember if I put it on my pants, it would actually start pulling them down. So I would just mostly carry it in my hand and just hate the
That's
sound of
so
the spring.
funny. Oh my god, that's hilarious. I can't believe this nurse would like get dolled up and go to the club and then like come back to work. So what did she do? Did she like just go like dance, have a couple drinks, and come back and do her shift?
I'm pretty sure that's what she did.
Oh my god.
But she was one
That
of those
is
people. She was
crazy.
one of those people that you just wouldn't question. I don't know how to explain it. She just had this attitude about her that you're like, just, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I didn't see or
No
hear
one's gonna
anything.
stop her. No one's like everyone's like, you do you, honey, you do you.
As
Oh my
long as you get back
god.
on time and you're taking care of your patients, what do I care? I'm not in charge. Uh,
That is so funny. Oh my god.
and even
Oh my god.
like just going back to the whole food situation, right? So I think you had posted or said something about how you like cold pizza nights.
Oh yeah, that was my jam.
So my jam was Chinese food, um, and chicken wings. And again, this is like the days before there was Uber and Skip the Dishes and all of those
Yep.
things, right? So we would just sit there and look up restaurants that were open past 12, and we would just place our order. And then I remember like I used to work. There was a group of us that were on the same line, and we worked together. And one of them was charge nurse, and she always played classical music on her phone because she thought it helped everyone relax. So whenever she was on, it was classical music at the nurse's station for the full 12 hours, almost.
Oh my god.
And
Wouldn't that just put everyone to sleep?
well, it was just softly at the nurse's station, so it wasn't like you
Oh,
could
okay.
hear it from far away. But we ordered wings once, and I think they mixed up our order because we said mild, but they gave us like the hottest possible one. But but we didn't want to waste it, right? So there's like the nurse's station, and you can kind of round a corner where people like the patients can't see you if they come to the desk. And so we had styrofoam cups with water in them so we could sort of rinse off the sauce that was on it.
Oh my god, that's so ghetto.
And then we're eating them with like gloves on because we just thought like we didn't want it to get on our hands either. So can you picture us like leaned over the computer desk and we're eating chicken wings and dipping them in this styrofoam cup of water just to rinse it off.
That's so ghetto. Oh my god. Why did you like for me? I was like, okay, I'm gonna just take the burn and deal with the like indigestion at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I oh my gosh, the stuff that we would eat on nights was unreal, Sarah. Like nobody should be eating meals like that past 12 o'clock. Like nobody should be eating that crap. But I remember like we'd have these crazy potlucks. Like I remember like as soon as management and everybody was out, lights went down, music came on, and like the whole back table would be filled with garbage. Just like there, like this person would bring this food, and like we would like 3 o'clock in the morning, we're eating like hot wings or we're eating like fried chicken and French fries and poutine. We didn't care. It's like this is so good because it was like the only way that it would kind of keep us going, right? So,
I know.
yep.
I'm sure
But I
there's
have
more. You have more stories?
yes, I have a story that we actually both have heard, and I'm not too sure the validity, but I'm going to talk about the story in terms of what we heard. So at a previous place at which we were employed, they had like a wellness center, and I guess this wellness area had beanbag chairs. Do you
Oh,
know where I'm going
I
with
know where this
this?
is going. Yep.
So essentially in this place you're only supposed okay, it's crazy because they have like beanbag chairs, they have recliners, they have like a little coloring center where you can like color pictures and all sorts of things like that. Like most hospitals who have wellness centers have these kind of things in them. Anyhow, so in this particular with this particular story, what I heard was um, nurses typically would go down on their nights and sleep in the beanbag chairs. Not supposed to, because the area is supposed to be just for like relaxation. Well, someone decided to take relaxation to the ultimate extreme. So, of course, it's a hospital, so there's cameras. Come on, like you would think that,
There's no cameras in that room, is there?
I think well, how did these people get caught? I thought there was cameras. Anyhow, long and short of the story was, this particular nurse, and I don't know if it was two nurses or if it was a nurse and a physician, whatever the case may be, used to frequent to visit this relaxation area with the beanbag chairs. And boy, did they ever decide to relax, because eventually they ended up getting caught. I don't know if it was another staff member walked in on them or whatever the case may be. And if you have no idea, what I'm trying to say is they were caught having sex downstairs on the beanbag chairs.
Amy, I
Well,
think everybody knew what you were going to say, but thank you for clarifying that,
I
just in
just had to
case.
I just had to make sure that just in case you had no idea what I was saying, they were getting freaky nasty on those beanbag chairs. Well, I found out I used to love going down on these, like going down, like I need 5 minutes. I need to go down and get some R&R on these beanbag chairs. And then I found out that people used to frolic on these beanbag chairs. Well, I can never get that time back or ever wash my skin off, because I know they probably don't wipe those beanbag chairs, and they're like huge. Those beanbag chairs, like once you sit into them, your whole, it like envelops your whole body. So once I found out that, that happened, I just, it's
Oh,
so gross.
Amy,
No.
Amy, you know what? I still have a hard time believing it because there were so many other areas they could have gone that were private because this is accessible to everyone. So if
Well,
they
this is why they
wanted
said
to
that they
get
started to
caught,
lock the wellness area at nights, because people would be doing all sorts of
I
like,
feel like if
yes.
it was true that maybe on some level they wanted to get caught. And also, after
Oh.
I heard that story, I heard that story because I think you told me or someone around the same time told me. I had no trouble going back there. I'm like, I don't care. My beanbag looks clean.
No,
What do I
ew.
care? It's like my one place to relax. I'm not going to let them ruin it for me when I don't even know if it's
No,
true.
it's been ruined. They've tainted the chairs. It's like, but
Uh,
like really, if you think about a hospital, and I'm not suggesting people do this at all, by no means. I think there's a lot of other safer places to do that.
I
Just
still
saying.
think, yeah, I think there are better places to go. Maybe not as comfortable because the beanbag chair is the beanbag chair, but what do I know?
Yeah, well,
Also,
I have
I
no
have to
experience with
say,
that, so I can't really speak to it.
there weren't just beanbag chairs. There were three recliner chairs that were facing the window. Do you remember? So it might have been
Yeah.
in the recliner chair, not necessarily the beanbag chair.
Either way, there's a time and a place, and I just don't know if that was the time nor the place. But yeah,
Right.
like I'm pretty sure that that is not the first time someone's had sex at a hospital. Like we hear about patients having sex with each other,
Yeah,
patients and their spouses coming in having sex with each other. And of course, I'm sure it's not happening on the day shift. It's happening on nights. So
yep,
it's just where all the fun is. What happens on nights stays on nights, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so I think that's the craziest stories that we have. I'm sure you out there, you listeners out there probably have some crazier stories than ours. We would love
Yeah,
to
we'd
hear
love to
them.
hear them.
So if you are able to, you can definitely check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. You can also listen to our podcast on Apple Podcasts. We have a new YouTube channel as well as Spotify. So definitely like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you
Okay.
soon.
Yeah, take care.